All of those little souls in one place. Just for us. A gift.
Connection terminated. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth, if you still even remember that name, but I'm afraid you've been misinformed.
When the first Five Nights at Freddy's game released, I was still in elementary school. When Security Breach released, I was in my last year of high school, and this year, the year of both the movie and the sequel to Help Wanted, I'm in my second year of college. The first time I played the game myself, I was 12, and I've been watching other people play it since that first release in 2014. I was there for the FNaF 4 box, for Candy Cadet, for all of MatPat's theories. I have watched him unravel and become more and more unhinged in real time. My first freelance writing job, one I still do, is specifically writing about Five Nights at Freddy's, and even got me interviewed for the New York freaking Times, which I've never stopped bragging about. I'm trying to establish that I've been a longtime fan since the early days of the series. I've literally grown up alongside it. Because I'm about to talk about it in a way that could easily be misconstrued. To some, it might sound like I hate FNaF, or the movie specifically, but that's not the case. For all its flaws, and there are many, I do genuinely love Five Nights at Freddy's, and I really enjoyed the movie. But when I left the theater on opening night, I felt weird. I liked the movie, I would even say I loved it, but there was this nagging feeling that something was not right. There was a strange emptiness under my excitement, a feeling I can only describe as, what the fuck am I supposed to do now? Five Nights at Freddy's, for me, has had this feeling for a while now. While the original game was fairly simple, each subsequent edition only added more to the complexity, and at some point, that became a bad thing. FNaF, in its original story, was about one man committing horrible atrocities, leading to possessed animatronics, which are now your problem. Now, it's so much more than that. There are so many different possibilities, hundreds of absurd rabbit holes. At this point in time, there have been 3 separate games that were meant to be the last, each followed up by more convoluted lore to keep the series chugging along. What was once a story of a serial killer and ghost animatronics is now a story of AI and corporate monopolies, with a deluded bad guy who's died at least 4 or 5 times now. Here's all the lore you need to know for the first game. Sometime in the 80s, a guy dressed up as a yellow rabbit and lured 5 kids to their deaths. He was never convicted, and the bodies were never found because he stuffed them inside the animatronics. Ever since, the ghosts of those kids have possessed the animatronics, and while they're fine during the day, you are night guard, and they mistake any adults for the man who killed them, so you have to fight to survive. I tried writing out the lore you'd need to understand the most recent game for comparison, and the lore alone, unfinished, was over 7 pages. I'm not a recap channel, and I'm not trying to be. So if you want, there are a million different timeline videos on here that can explain it better than I can. Instead, I'll just tell you all the stuff you need to be aware of to play the new games. As far as games go, there's the original first 4 FNaF games, Sister Location, and Pizzeria Simulator. Ultimate Custom Night is relevant but not fully necessary, because the only thing you need to know about it is that William Afton's soul is in hell, being tormented by those he killed in life. After those, you still need to play FNaF Help Wanted, which is best in VR but has been ported to console and PC, and its DLC The Curse of Dreadbear, which isn't fully necessary again, but provides important clues towards the lore. Then there's Security Breach and its DLC Ruin. There's also the original novel trilogy, which is really important to understanding a lot of the lore. The Security Logbook, multiple lore books, and 2 massive Goosebumps-esque series that are largely unimportant, but have a few stories and overarching epilogues that are necessary for Ruin. The first series, Fazbear Frights, is largely skippable with a few small lore drops here and there, but the second series, Tales from the Pizzaplex, is required for the most recent lore. Meaning that if you're just reading Tales from the Pizzaplex, the original novel trilogy, and the Security Logbook, that's 13 books, 9 games, and 2 DLCs. And that's not even counting supplemental material like the guidebooks, garbage character encyclopedia, Steel Wool Shorts, or Fazbear Frights and ARG stuff. With so much stuff, it's pretty clear what the biggest problem with the franchise is. Five Nights at Freddy's is an unfiltered mess. There's so much stuff that contradicts or just doesn't fit together. For example, FNaF 4 was initially believed to be a boy stuck in a coma due to a ton of in-game clues pointing towards it. Then theorized to be William Afton using animatronics to keep his kids in check based on clues in sister location. Then it was Mike's dreams based on the security logbook and the phone guy heard in the background. Now it's something else entirely. A new book for Tales of the Pizzaplex told the story of a boy trapped in a house tormented by animatronics, revealed to just be mannequins and hallucinatory gas in an experiment conducted by William Afton, where he kidnapped and experimented on multiple children. It's not clear if this is canon or not, and if it is, where exactly it fits into the already established lore, or what we're meant to do with the clues that led to all of these past theories. And if there's a piece of FNaF media that exhibits this problem most clearly, it's the movie. When the trailer for the movie first came out, I was, more than anything else, confused. This movie was announced when I was in middle school. I had waited nearly a decade for it. But even at the trailer, something was just off. The movie itself was advertised as essentially the first game, but parts of it were out of place. For starters, this movie was going to feature Vanessa, a character who doesn't show up until the 8th game as a real main character, and is debatable in the 7th. It was going to feature a main character who doesn't show up until the 8th game, and canonically shouldn't even really have been born yet in the adaptation of the first game. That was enough to cause some concern. Before we can go any deeper, I feel like I've got to give you the basics of the movie. I'm assuming you already know the basics of the game here, so I've kind of already shot myself in the foot. If you know everything you need to know about the games, why would you have not seen the movie? Regardless, I have time to explain the movie. I've attempted in drafts to explain the games, and it's always ended up way longer and more convoluted than it needs to be. To reiterate, I am not a recap channel, nor am I a story explained channel. I'm just giving the basic building blocks I have time for so we can build from there. Again, if you want to know about the games, watch one of the thousands of lore and timeline videos. I'm not even gonna attempt to make one of those. So the basic story of the movie goes something like this. Mike Schmidt is a working-class 20-something trying to hold a steady job and keep custody of his likely neurodivergent younger sister, but he's so stuck in the past that his trauma responses keep setting him back. After losing his last job as a mall security guard, a job counselor suggests he takes a job as a security guard for the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Mike initially declines because he can't work nights, but accepts when it becomes clear he has no other options. He mostly sleeps at work, being tormented by memories of when his younger brother Garrett was kidnapped. Vanessa, a police officer, starts showing up during his shifts and telling him about the place. Meanwhile, Mike's aunt is scheming to get custody of Abby. She bribes Max, Abby's babysitter, and hires her brother and his friends to trash Freddy's so Mike will get fired. However, while inside, they all end up murdered by the animatronics, and when Max goes in to look for them, she finds herself killed as well. Vanessa shows up to tell Mike about the break-in, and he ends up telling her about the disappearance of his brother and how he ended up with custody of Abby. Later that night, Mike isn't able to get a hold of Max to babysit, so he takes Abby to work with him. They soon realize that the animatronics are alive, and Vanessa explains how they're possessed by ghosts of 5 kids that were murdered there. They're mostly chill, though, so Abby, Mike, and Vanessa play around for a bit and build a fort with them. At one point, Abby strikes the strings of Bonnie's bass, which has live electricity in it, and gets knocked out. Vanessa completely switches gears here, getting upset with Mike for his voiced concerns and telling him if he ever brings Abby back there, she'll shoot him. The next day, Mike gets Aunt Jane to watch Abby, but seeing her there along with the unsigned custody papers makes her think Mike's giving her away. She shuts herself in her room and Mike goes to work, believing the kids can somehow tell him who took his brother. Instead, they offer him a vision of his life with Garrett and his parents still all together, promising it can be like that forever in exchange for Abby. In a moment of desperation, he agrees, but almost instantly realizes his mistake and takes it back. The animatronics beat the shit out of him and Golden Freddy goes to take Abby back to Freddy's. Jane is apparently dead during this scene, we'll get to it later, and Mike wakes up in a police outpost, having been patched up by Vanessa. She gives another lore dump here appear, explaining why the animatronics are trying to kill Abby, and explaining that the man who murdered them is William Afton, her father. Mike speeds back to the pizzeria and nearly escapes with Abby, but William arrives in his signature spring-lock suit, explaining that he killed Mike's brother. Oh yeah, he's also revealed to have been that job counselor guy. He proceeds to once again beat the shit out of Mike, but Vanessa arrives and shoots him. He stabs her, and Mike realizes that he tricks the ghost through drawings, telling Abby to make a new drawing to help them remember the truth. William gets a cool speech before the spring-lock snapshot on him, and the animatronics drag him away into the back room. Mike and Abby are safe, Vanessa is in a coma, and William is dead for now until they make the sequel. Everyone's happy. But I don't know if I am. I liked the movie, really, I did. There was so much that was good about it. But again, there are just too many things that are off. Like, Vanessa. I really don't know how I feel about Vanessa. I talked a bit about how weird it was to insert a character who doesn't show up until the later games into an adaptation of the first, but this Vanessa is pretty much an entirely new character. In the games, Vanessa is a beta tester for FNaF VR who gets brainwashed by Glitchtrap. She later becomes a security guard at the Pizzaplex so she can keep a close eye on things and fulfill Glitchtrap's plans. In the movie, Vanessa is a police officer who's mostly just there to tell Mike the lore that fans of the games already know. Her dad is William Afton, but this isn't really expanded upon, and she was initially helping him with his plan before meeting Mike and Abby and deciding to stand up to him. Like her in-game counterpart, Vanessa is still controlled by Afton and trying to break free. But here, it's due to emotional manipulation from a parent instead of just, "Oh no, there's an evil NFT man downloaded into my brain." There are a few different theories about just who this version of Vanessa is supposed to be. Is she this world's Elizabeth? Did Scott switch Henry and William's families around to make her a version of Charlie? But I don't think any of that is too important. Mostly, I think it's a very strange choice. A choice I'm not necessarily against, if I could see a genuine reason for it. But aside from adding in a little bit of extra family drama that was lost by not having Mike be William's son and telling us the backstory of Freddy straight to our faces, I don't know what she's doing here. I don't see anything about her character that justifies its existence. She's out of place, and it's obvious that she doesn't belong. Of course, despite this lack of reasons, I do see a few possibilities for her. But these all rely on a sequel. They prevent this movie from being able to stand on its own. But these days, can any piece of FNaF media really stand on its own? Here are the possibilities I can see for Vanessa. Maybe she's just a side character in this movie, but a main character in the future. With Mike not being Afton's son, she could be a Michael Afton stand-in, working to repent for her father's sins and the time she was helping him. Honestly, it would give her more character and make her way more interesting than she is here. But it still wouldn't fix how out of place she feels in the first movie. If a character relies on a sequel to be fixed, maybe they shouldn't have been included in the first place. There's also the family swap theory that's been making the rounds throughout the fandom. The theory posits that Scott is switching things up. Instead of being an Elizabeth stand-in, Vanessa is a Charlie stand-in, and William Afton and Henry Emily's families have been switched. Meaning Mike would be Henry's son, and Henry would be, the father that killed himself. I personally hate this. Splitting the two main families into good one and bad one removes any complexity the series had. The main drama of the stories come from being a son facing off against your father while still having to own up to the mistakes of your own past. As Henry's kid, well, it's just not the same if you're facing off against an old family friend. And in the movies, he doesn't even know him. And again, this still requires knowing about other FNaF stuff. I don't want that. I don't want a mess of fan service that relies on pre-existing knowledge. I just want a translation of the story I love that's, well, a good story still. Along with Vanessa comes the issue of Mike. In the games, Mike Schmidt is hinted to be an alias for Michael Afton, the son of the main villain working now to dismantle his crimes and make up for the way he bullied and accidentally killed his own brother as a child. There is drama here, there is pathos, there is tragedy. It's interesting and it works really well. The movie version of Mike is presumably just some guy. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Mike as a character works pretty well, and you can really understand his struggles. Him and Abby are both written pretty realistically, and I've gotta appreciate that. But I still just don't understand where this is coming from. Why make Mike a separate guy? Why here? Why now? Why add in Abby and Garrett if he's just for this story? Why create these characters that are foils for other characters but still distinct enough to be separate? Why make them shells of their former selves? I just don't get it. Scott Cawthon has been expressly clear that every time he makes a new piece of FNaF media, he makes sure to use it to clarify things from the past. For example, the Silver Eyes novel told us Charlie was Henry's daughter, Sister Location gave us the name William Afton, the reveal that the FNaF 4 house was being surveilled from the bunker, that the Fredbear plush had a camera and microphone hidden inside it. Pizzeria Simulator gave us the names of the missing children's incident kids, and so much more. It's easy to take these details for granted in the year of our Lord 2023, but at the time, these were huge, these were fucking earth-shattering. And I just don't know what the FNaF movie is trying to say. Looking at it from purely a lore perspective, it fully rejects the FNaF 4 dream theory, but pretty much everyone above the age of 12 already agreed that that was dumb. I guess it could be saying that Mike Schmidt is not Michael Afton, but then why all the focus on his character and family if he isn't relevant to the story as a whole? I'm just stuck on this feeling, the feeling that there's so much at this point, I don't know what to do. If Mike Schmidt isn't Michael Afton, why all the hints that downright require him to be? What is the point if it's all for a retcon? At this point, there's so much stuff that just seems to conflict with each other. I don't even know how to classify everything. Going back to those two Goosebumps-esque novel series, one of those is mostly just silly kids stories, and the other is incredibly important to the story of the games. Without it, the Villain of Security Breach's DLC Ruin, one of the biggest games in the series' history, just comes out of nowhere. And even if you have read these stories, that's still how it feels. This guy had no build-up, no foreshadowing of any kind, just to throw him in as a last-minute replacement when fans didn't like that good old daddy murder was back at it again. It's shoddy writing! Five Nights at Freddy's as a series is both stale and oversaturated. I can't even begin to express the way I feel about it all because it just doesn't make sense. Five Nights at Freddy's, if it is going to continue to exist, needs to start diverging from its previous villains and stories and do something new. But when they decide to do that, we get stories where Matthew Patrick gets physically impregnated by VR Springtrap's Fazgoo. It's absurd! I said earlier, we'd get back to Aunt Jane later. Here's the thing with Aunt Jane. She's kind of the main antagonist here. Considering William Afton gets maybe 10 minutes of screen time total, she's present far more often, and she seems constantly like a bigger threat. Throughout the movie, this was the conflict I was most worried about. You can kill a bad guy in an abandoned building, sure, but getting through the legal mess of a custody battle is far more complex and intricate. But as I said earlier, Aunt Jane is seemingly killed off in Mike's apartment. Golden Freddy tells Abby she's sleeping, but come on, let's not kid ourselves here. This is supposed to be a horror movie, and we've seen what these things can do. After Jane's death, though, we just never see her again. This is weird, right? She was killed in Mike's apartment after being a threat to no one but Mike. To any law enforcement, this is an open and shut case. But Jane is never even mentioned again. They don't dump the body or call the police or clean up. She's just gone. So fine, maybe she's not dead. But Mike has custody of Abby and she doesn't come to bother him again. Everything in the movie is pointing to her being dead, and it seems like any consequence died along with her. In Terminator, Sarah Connor saves the world. And what does it get her? She's thrown in a mental asylum and separated from the kid she's been trying to protect. She was reasonable, she was logical, she did her best. But she lives in a world where time-traveling killer robots sound insane. There was no explanation for the mess at the end of the movie, so she's punished for it. It shows that you can do everything right in a horror movie, but the real horror of it is the society around you. You can do everything right, But there are consequences for what takes place in a horror movie. The second biggest problem with Five Nights at Freddy's as a series might be that lack of consequence. I don't know how to end this. I really don't. In one hand sits a series I have loved since childhood, a series that despite it all, I still really love. And in the other, a shriveled corpse of what once was. Five Nights at Freddy's has become too much. It can't sustain itself anymore. Like Tetsuo's flesh consuming him when he couldn't handle his power, Five Nights at Freddy's has eaten itself, digested itself so thoroughly that everything new is built on its bones. And those bones need to be left behind, left to rot if anything new and worthwhile is ever going to come. FNaF just has too much stuff. It all melds together and congeals, making an absolute mess of a series that genuinely is kinda good. I wish it wasn't such a mess. I hope desperately that there's a way out of this, but I don't know if there is, because it was built like this on purpose. It was meant to be too vague, specifically so that people would keep making theories. At this point, fan theories are what keeps FNaF alive, keeps it relevant. Scott Cawthon is too much of a coward to ever really shed that formula. As much as I wish things could be different, at the end of the day, I'm still stuck with this weird feeling. What do we do with the FNaF movie? What do we do with any piece of FNaF media when it has made itself inhospitable? In what world can any of this be made to make sense? It can't, because it was designed not to do that. But what do I know? I'm gonna go play Help Wanted 2.
Can you blow my whistle, baby, let me know. Girl, I'm gonna show you how to do it, and we start real slow. You just put your lips together and you come real close. Can you blow my whistle, baby, Here.
I own the Five Nights at Freddy's cookbook, and if you enjoyed this video, there's now an exclusive cooking companion video where I cook recipes from it, including pizza, cheesy garlic bread, and goop, Monty's Gator Goop. If you're interested, hop on over to Patreon and join at a $3 or up tier, and you'll get exclusive access to that cooking video, an upcoming cooking video, early access to videos, and all sorts of director's commentaries and behind-the-scenes looks. Thanks for watching.